Hey guys, this is Justin Hunter from OSU-OKC's paramedicine program, and I'm coming at you with a spotlight of an amazing story. I want to share with you this story about one of our students who's an EMT student, not a paramedic student, who had a major impact on a patient's life and all of the lives of the patient's family. This is going to be an amazing story of a younger gentleman, early 40s, pretty good shape, who had a major incident that took place, and due to unique events that happened, an EMT was put in a position where she had to make a life or death situation and choose which way to go. And happy for everybody involved that she made a great decision, and this patient was able to go home alive and see his family. This student is probably pretty nervous because I actually grabbed her about 5 seconds after she completed her National Registry BLS psychomotor exam and she was given her results. And I kind of just caught her off guard and pulled her into one of the simulation labs and gave her an impromptu interview. So without further ado, let's jump right in and get started, and we'll let you know what she says. So my name is Justin Hunter. I'm the paramedicine program director at Oklahoma State University. I'm here with Amber Fisher, who has just completed her EMT testing and program here. And I wanted to tell you about this crazy story. Amber, again, she's an EMT. She's not a paramedic student. She's an EMT student. And so she was out on a call. Give us the lowdown on what happened on the call in like 30 or 40 seconds.
Yeah, so I was out on a call, and so we arrived at the home of a 47-year-old male who was sitting on his couch having chest pains. He was sweating, clearly having some cardiac issues.
Like Amber said, she is out on an EMS clinical, which is where an EMT or a paramedic student would ride with a licensed paramedic and a licensed EMT and respond to 911 calls. In this case, she was in a busy 911 system just outside of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and she's been responding to 911 calls all day long when this 911 call came in. In this particular case, Amber was out on a 911 ambulance doing clinicals for the day, responding to 911 calls as a student. She's got a paramedic preceptor and she's got an EMT preceptor. In this case, the paramedic is in the back with her and the EMT is driving, and she and her crew get dispatched to a 911 call for a 42-year-old, pretty healthy male with the chief complaint of severe chest pain. In most 911 calls, I'll be honest with you, I've been a paramedic for a long time, they're not that time sensitive. Some things are, some major traumas, some strokes, some cardiacs. And in this case, this is one of those cardiac issues where time does matter. We say time is tissue. And in this case, they got there extremely fast and found this young man sitting on a couch, and his family happened to be present. Now, families aren't always present, but that will play a role later on. Paramedics these days are far more than just ambulance drivers. So are the EMTs. They're critical thinkers with the ability to do extremely advanced diagnoses and extremely advanced treatments out in the field. They can basically bring an entire emergency room straight to the patient. In this case, this patient was complaining of chest pain, and the biggest priority is that he get an immediate full electrocardiogram or EKG. They carry one of these with them, and they have to perform it right there in the patient's house. Very quickly, the paramedic does an amazing job and finds out that this patient is having a full inferior heart attack. That means the bottom part of their heart. They treated him with aspirin, nitroglycerin, and maybe even some morphine or fentanyl to control the pain. When we talk about what an inferior heart attack is, it means that the very bottom of the heart is dying. It's not getting any blood flow, and they need to get to a cath lab immediately. Did they do an EKG in the house?
Yes, they did, and he was showing a slight cardiac activity. The EMT explained to me, that he was having a cardiac episode.
And so for all you paramedic folks at home, you guys obviously know what that electrical activity is that she's talking about. This guy was having a full-blown inferior MI, and so the paramedic got them on the cot really quick, got him out to the truck because this is a rapid situation. We get out to the truck and we're going to take him to the hospital. What happens once you guys are out in the truck? So what do? They quickly load the patient up and get him on the stretcher and get him in the ambulance and start to head to the hospital, where a cath lab team and a cardiologist will be waiting in the cath lab to fix this patient and try to save his life. While they're on the way to the hospital, it's important to know where everybody's sitting on this ambulance. This is a typical view of what the back of an ambulance would look like. And Miss Amber was sitting right there in what we call the captain's chair. The paramedic was sitting on the left side of the patient, taking care of the patient. And obviously the patient was laying directly in the middle of the stretcher. As the ambulance departs the house and heads to the hospital, the EMT who is driving notices that the family is following the ambulance at full speed down the highway. This is an extremely dangerous situation, and in this very moment, the paramedic has to stop and get out and tell them to slow down. While that's happening, Miss Amber is left alone in the back of the ambulance for about a minute while the paramedic makes a safety decision to keep the family from getting hit by another car. They don't have their own lights and sirens, and it's very, very important to keep them from following the ambulance, lights and sirens through red lights and stuff like that. And so he definitely made the right call. I've made that call 100 times myself, and he had to get out of the ambulance and tell the family to obey the rules of the road and that they would meet him at the hospital. This excursion takes about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And all the meanwhile, Miss Amber is in the back of the ambulance taking care of the patient who just a moment ago was alert and oriented ×4 and was pretty stable with stable vital signs. But as soon as that paramedic jumped out of the ambulance, the patient went into a deadly cardiac arrhythmia known as ventricular fibrillation. The patient is completely unresponsive, is not breathing, and does not have a pulse. For all clinical purposes, the patient has just died right in front of Amber. Without missing a beat, Amber jumps up, recognizes the rhythm. How she recognizes the rhythm, most people would normally not know, but she's going to explain it here in just a moment. And then starts the world's best CPR. We know it's great CPR because we actually measure it with our equipment. The paramedic jumps back in the ambulance about 90 seconds later and immediately defibrillates the patient, stopping his heart from fibrillating, restoring a pulse, and helping the patient's life to be saved. And because of Amber's quick thinking, along with the critical thinking of the paramedic and the EMT, this guy was able to go home, spend another day with his family, and is going to live a full life.
And how did you know what the squiggly lines on the monitor meant?
So my teacher had taught us that was one of the shockable rhythms, and that he's not having any pumping of his heart.
And so. Who was the instructor?
Mr. McClure.
Now let's talk about Mr. McClure for just a second, who she mentioned was her EMT instructor. Mr. McClure is a unique individual, and anybody that knows him knows exactly what I'm talking about. But I've been busting this guy's chops for many, many years for taking way too much time to get in depth on ECG rhythms, cardiac arrhythmias, and other things that most people would think would be irrelevant to an EMT, at least in EMT school. I'd always come in and find him writing all of this stuff on the whiteboard that I thought that was way over the top for EMTs, but he continued to do it anyway. And in this case, it panned out. Amber not only knew that the patient was dead, she recognized the rhythm. She recognized that it was V-fib and knew that this guy had died. And that's why she was able to act so quickly. Like I said before, the time is tissue when it comes to people having heart attacks. 10 seconds matters. 1 minute matters. And she didn't delay and saved at least 1, 2, maybe 3 minutes. And not only did she act very, very quickly, she also performed amazing CPR and stayed calm, stayed chill, and stayed cool. All right, and here we are looking at the first EKG that was taken. It's been redacted because we don't want to share any patient information with you, but you can see that this was taken just in July of this year, and it was taken at 11 o'clock in the morning. 42-year-old male. And what we can look at is we can look down here on the left side and on the bottom of this EKG and even a little bit of stuff over on the right side of the EKG and find out that this patient is clearly having a lack of blood flow through his right coronary artery. His right coronary artery is blocked, which means the inferior or the bottom part of his heart is dying. It's dying right in front of us, and we're taking a picture of it. This was taken at 11 o'clock, and as we move forward, just 6 minutes later, we can see that it's progressed just a little bit to actually start including a little bit of the lateral side of the heart, meaning the left side of this patient's heart. We see lots of other words up here, which some people call a doc in the box, and sometimes the doc in the box is right and sometimes wrong. But in this case, meets ST elevation MI criteria, meaning that this patient is having a STEMI. That's not always right, and we rely on the paramedics professional opinion of the EKG 99% of the time. And in this case, the paramedic was spot on. And I love that he actually took serial 12 leads. He took one at 11, he took one at 11:06, and then he took one 10 minutes later. And on this one, you can definitely see over in what we call leads V5 and V6, where there starts to be more of what we call ST elevation, and now we're having a little bit of lateral involvement. An amazing job at identifying the STEMI, taking multiple 12 leads, just an overall awesome job of diagnosing what was wrong with this patient. So this is going to be a recording of what this patient's heart rate looks like. It's weird that we can actually see some ST elevation in the rhythm, but otherwise it's just a normal sinus tach, maybe a little fast, but it looks good. And then all of a sudden something's going to change. And there's our change. At that point, as soon as you see those squiggly lines pop up on your screen, this patient has died. They're not awake, they're not responsive, they're not breathing, they're not moving. And at this point, the paramedic was outside the ambulance tending to a major safety concern so that no one else got hurt. Right about here is where Miss Amber jumps up out of her seat, recognizes that this patient is in ventricular fibrillation, and then starts high quality CPR. And there you can see her compressions on the screen. She's moving the patient a little bit. And what you see on the screen is still amazing CPR being done by Amber. The patient has quick pads placed on their chest. The defibrillator has now been charged. And right there in that blank spot is where you see the actual defibrillation. Patient goes into a VTAC looking rhythm that looks pretty good. And then it just seems to convert to a normal sinus rhythm. Overall, guys, this is the kind of stuff that we do at our program. This is the kind of stuff that paramedics and EMTs are doing all across the world. It's an amazing thing to know that anybody can recognize this stuff, let alone an EMT student who is normally never taught any of these types of things. They're not taught about rhythms. They're really not taught about what a rhythm looks like other than what they might see on an automated defibrillator, not a manual one such as this. The paramedic on this ambulance did an amazing job. The EMT did an amazing job. And Miss Amber, she did an amazing job. I'm super stoked that she's a part of our program. Our faculty and staff are amazing in helping her to get where she has been. It's an amazing success story. And in the end, why do we do this? We always ask, what is our why? Our why is this guy gets to go home and hang out with his family, not just for another day, but for 30, 40 more years of his life. I'm super happy about it. I'm super proud of Amber. Y'all take care. And as always, go Pokes.
Amber, good job.